The sun had barely crested the pines when I cast my first line into the still water. The lake shimmered with that soft gold hue you only get in early morning solitude. This was my sanctuary, quiet, ancient mine, passed down from my grandfather to my father, and finally to me. It was more than just a body of water. It was family history reflected in ripples. I'd left city life behind 2 years ago, sold the company, and bought back the old family land. I built a modest cabin with my own hands and let the world fall away. No honking horns, no pointless meetings, just the whip of a rod, the bite of a bass, and the wind rustling secrets through the evergreens. That was the plan. Peace and stillness. But even paradise has a borderland. Mine lay just beyond the northern edge of the lake. There, nestled behind faux iron gates and cookie-cutter McMansions, sprawled a development known as the Lakes at Silver Pines, a name both overreaching and ironic because while they boasted lakefront living, the lake wasn't theirs, it was mine at first. I ignored them. The HOA seemed content to patrol their sidewalks and measure grass blades with rulers. Their community newsletter came once, uninvited, tucked in my mailbox like a bad joke. I didn't respond. Then the first sign appeared, nailed to a tree on my property. Bold white letters on a red background, nitrogen monoxide, fishing HOA, Rule 14.3. I ripped it down. 3 days later, 2 more popped up, same message, different trees. I walked into the HOA clubhouse, a smug brick building with American flags and security cameras, where I met the man behind the madness, Gerald Shaw. He had the polished smile of someone who'd never caught a fish but probably had 5 trophies for leadership at his local Toastmasters. Retired dentist, I later learned, and self-declared president for life of the HOA. You're trespassing, I said calmly, laying the sign on his desk. Gerald barely looked up. You're welcome to attend our next board meeting and voice your concerns. My only concern is your board hammering signs into my trees. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. The lake is adjacent to Silver Pines. We have jurisdiction over its usage. That includes fishing restrictions. Let me be clear, I said, voice steady. This lake has been in my family since 1963. It's privately deeded. You don't own 1 inch of it. He smiled wider, like I'd just challenged him to a chess match he was sure he'd already won. That's something we can have our legal committee review. You do that, I said, already turning for the door. And while you're at it, tell your legal committee to stay the hell off my land. I figured that would be the end of it. Men like Gerald tend to fold when confronted by real boundaries, but I underestimated him and the pettiness of bureaucracy in a polyester blazer. 2 weeks later, it escalated. It was just after dawn, the lake, glassy and breathless. I stood knee-deep in the shallows, boots submerged, casting into the mist. That's when I heard it, gravel crunching, tires rolling. 3 sheriff's cruisers pulled up along the dirt road that circled the lake. Lights on, no sirens. A deputy stepped out, hand resting casually near his hip. He looked young, mid-20s, and uncomfortable, like he already knew this was nonsense. Morning, he said. Got a report of trespassing and unauthorized fishing. I blinked. You're serious? He scratched the back of his neck. Call came from the HOA, claimed someone was illegally using community property. I walked to the tackle box sitting on shore and pulled out the weathered deed, the same one I kept laminated ever since the first sign appeared. Check the name on that lake, I said, handing it over. He did. Paused, then looked at me with the faintest grin. Appreciate your time, he said, walking back to the cruiser. Have a good morning, sir. The cruisers rolled away, red and blue lights dimming behind the trees. But the silence they left wasn't peaceful, it buzzed with violation. The HOA hadn't just crossed a line. They'd declared war. I looked out across the water, my water, and knew this wasn't about fishing anymore. It was about power, control, and Gerald Shaw had just picked a fight with the wrong man. Gerald Shaw wasn't just a petty tyrant with a taste for power. He was strategic, calculated, and now that I'd refused to roll over, he was hell-bent on making me regret it. The Monday after the sheriff visit, I found 4 more no fishing signs planted around my lake. This time, they were embedded deeper in the soil, like stakes in a battlefield. They weren't just symbols, they were declarations. I tore them out one by one, bundled them, and left them leaning against the Silver Pines entrance sign like trash. By Thursday, the HOA newsletter, the Silver Sentinel, featured a photo of me in midcast with the caption, "Unidentified man illegally accessing protected community waters." They blurred my face, but not enough. Anyone who lived nearby knew exactly who they were trying to shame, and that was the point. Gerald wanted to isolate me, turn the community against me, paint me as a threat to their peaceful way of life. But isolation didn't scare me. I'd lived through worse. What I didn't expect was the sheer relentlessness of their tactics. One morning, I woke to find an official-looking letter taped to my front door. It was from the Silver Pines Architectural Review Committee, citing me for a list of violations. The problem: I wasn't a member of the HOA, never had been. My property line sat 42 feet beyond their border, protected by both a deed and a buffer of trees. But that didn't stop Gerald. The letter claimed my log cabin disrupted the visual harmony of the lakefront aesthetic and demanded modifications to my own home based on regulations I wasn't subject to. I laughed. Then I called my lawyer. Meanwhile, things got personal. On a crisp Saturday morning, I invited my 10-year-old nephew Jamie to spend the weekend. We spent hours by the lake, skipping stones, swapping stories about my grandfather. I taught him how to cast properly, how to feel the tension in a line before setting the hook. He caught a bluegill and I snapped a photo, Jamie beaming, water glistening behind him. That evening, while grilling burgers, I heard voices. I stepped out to see two HOA security officers, just retirees with walkie-talkies and neon vests, the edge of the tree line with binoculars. "Can I help you?" I called. One of them, a guy with a clipboard and a serious lack of neck, looked up. "We received a report of unauthorized recreational activity involving a minor." My jaw clenched. "You spying on my nephew, sir?" "We are tasked with ensuring compliance within the community." "This isn't your community," I snapped. "It's my land, and if I see either of you near it again, I'll file for stalking." They left, but not before filming my cabin, my truck, and even my license plate. The next day I got another letter. This one accused me of endangering a child through unregulated use of aquatic property. It was laughably until my sister saw the article on the HOA's website. She called in tears, worried sick, thinking CPS might show up at her door. That's when I realized Gerald didn't just want control, he wanted domination, he wanted submission, and he'd picked the wrong man to try and break. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the fire pit watching smoke twist into the night sky, Jamie's laughter still echoing in my mind. The water lapped softly against the rocks, peaceful, deceiving. I opened my laptop and pulled up the files my lawyer had sent earlier. Property lines, deeds, HOA maps, their bylaws, declarations, financial disclosures. I read every word, sipping coffee until the sky turned pale. And then I found it. Buried in their public HOA disclosures was something so stupid it was almost laughable. Silver Pines had been listing the lake, my lake, as a shared community amenity in their real estate brochures for over 7 years. I cross-referenced this with county land records, and sure enough, the HOA had no legal claim. Worse, they had collected lake maintenance fees from residents based on that false claim. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was fraud. I forwarded the documents to my attorney with a single sentence. "Let's hit them where it hurts." The reply came minutes later. "Copy that. Let's prepare for a lawsuit." 2 days after I sent the evidence to my lawyer, the storm officially began. We filed a civil lawsuit in county court: defamation, civil harassment, trespassing, and most damning of all, fraudulent misrepresentation of land ownership and amenity access. We were seeking $2.5 million in damages, backed by over a decade of paper trails, advertisements, and homeowner dues collected under false pretenses. Gerald Shaw received the summons on a Tuesday morning. By Friday, the entire Silver Pines board was scrambling. Their HOA newsletter went into overdrive, spinning frantic narratives about a disgruntled neighbor and a minor legal misunderstanding. But behind the curtain, panic had taken root. I knew because residents, real people, not just HOA pawns, began reaching out. One was Daniel Merrick, a retired Marine and one of the few voices of reason in the HOA. He showed up on my porch with a six-pack and an apology I never liked. "Gerald," he said, taking a seat by the fire pit, "most of us thought the lake was community-owned because that's what the brochures said. But now it looks like we were paying dues for something that wasn't his to sell. Y'all were misled," I said evenly. "But that doesn't give him the right to harass me, especially not with my nephew around." He nodded, jaw clenched. "You do what you gotta do. Honestly, most of us hope you take him down." And that's when something shifted. I wasn't just the outsider anymore. I was the guy standing up to the HOA machine everyone else had been too afraid to challenge. Over the next 2 weeks, more cracks appeared. 2 board members resigned quietly. A former treasurer emailed my lawyer anonymously, confirming that Gerald had insisted on referring to the lake as a shared amenity despite knowing it wasn't covered by the HOA's legal boundaries. Then came the email that sealed it. Buried in the discovery documents was a message from Gerald to the Silver Pines real estate liaison, dated 3 years earlier. It read, "Technically, the lake is outside our jurisdiction, but if we treat it as a shared feature, it boosts buyer interest. The guy who owns it rarely uses it anyway." That guy was me. It was deliberate, calculated deception. Not only had they falsely claimed my property, they'd used it to inflate property values and justify fees. My attorney, Marcus Kim, leaned back in his chair after reading it. "This isn't just a civil suit anymore," he said. "This is a PR nuke." We went public. The story hit local media within days. Lake Lies HOA accused of fraud, harassment, and explosive $2.5 million lawsuit. The accompanying article featured screenshots of Gerald's emails, maps from the county clerk's office, and resident testimonies. Comment sections blew up. The Silver Pines Facebook page shut down its comment threads. Real estate agents began delisting properties from MLS, citing pending legal entanglements. Gerald tried to fire back with a countersuit, laughable about malicious interference with HOA operations, but it was thrown out in less than a week. I didn't gloat. I didn't grandstand, I just kept fishing. One morning, as I reeled in a fat bass, I noticed something curious on the lake's far edge. The HOA's nitrogen monoxide fishing signs were gone, every single one. Someone had quietly removed them overnight. That same evening, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. It was from Gerald's lawyer. Inside, a formal offer to settle. They were willing to pay $950,000 if I dropped all claims and signed a non-disclosure agreement. I didn't even blink. No deal. I told Marcus, this isn't about money, it's about accountability. Gerald wanted this buried. I wanted it BROADCASTED. And as the court date neared, I knew this battle wasn't just mine anymore. It was every homeowner's who'd ever been bullied by a badge-wearing board member with too much time and not enough integrity. This wasn't a pond fight, it was a reckoning. The courthouse was packed like a powder keg. Word had spread. Local news stations, homeowners forums, even a legal blog out of Dallas had picked up the story. Landowner sues HOA for fraud over private lake. $2.5 million lawsuit goes to trial. Cameras lined the sidewalk as I walked in with my lawyer, Marcus Kim, carrying nothing but a binder, confidence, and the weight of every neighbor too afraid to challenge their HOA. Across the courtroom sat Gerald Shaw, flanked by the legal team and wearing a tailored navy suit that screamed desperation disguised as dignity. He still carried that smug posture, but the eyes gave him away, bloodshot, twitching. Scanning the crowd for some shred of control, he found none. Judge Helena Brooks, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a record of scorched earth rulings against corporate abuse, presided over the case. From the moment she slammed the gavel, it was clear this wasn't just a nuisance suit anymore. This was war with rules, records, and receipts. Marcus laid the foundation perfectly. Exhibit A, the original deed from 1963. Exhibit B, county maps clearly showing the lake fully enclosed within my property. Exhibit C, the HOA's own marketing materials promoting my lake as a community amenity. Then came the emails. He read them slowly, loudly. Greater than technically. The lake is outside our jurisdiction, but if we treat it as a shared feature. Judge Brooks raised an eyebrow. Gerald's lawyer tried to spin it as creative marketing language, but the damage was done. Residents took the stand one by one, explaining how they'd been misled, how they paid dues for access to a lake they never legally had a claim to. And then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand. Steady as stone, I came here for peace. I told the court. My family has fished this lake for 3 generations. I rebuilt that cabin to reconnect with a legacy, and I was harassed, slandered, and threatened because one man wanted to turn my property into his HOA's trophy. I paused, letting it hang in the air. Gerald Shaw thought no one would fight back. He forgot some people know how to cast a line and hold it until the hook sinks deep. There wasn't a sound in the courtroom, not even a cough by closing arguments. Gerald's team was flailing. They offered last-minute apologies, suggested a settlement again, this time for $1.2 million, but Judge Brooks waved it off. No more offers, she said. We're well past that. The jury deliberated for just under 2 hours when they returned. The foreman, a Silver Pines resident, ironically stood with the verdict sheet in hand. We find in favor of the plaintiff, he said, and award damages in the amount of $2.5 million. Gerald's face collapsed in on itself, like a deflated balloon. His hands trembled. His lawyers stared ahead, already calculating the insurance fallout, the board resignations, the bankruptcy petitions. But it wasn't over yet. Judge Brooks added her own dagger. In addition to monetary damages, the court issues a permanent injunction. Silver Pines HOA is barred from asserting any ownership or control over the lake in question. Furthermore, they are required to issue a formal apology, published publicly, acknowledging their fraudulent misrepresentation and unlawful harassment. Bang, gavel down. War over. 2 weeks later, Gerald Shaw resigned in disgrace. The HOA crumbled under the weight of resident outrage and legal fallout. Silver Pines hired an external auditor and replaced its entire board. The community lake signs were taken down forever, and I didn't touch a penny of the award for the first month. I spent my time back on the water, watching the ripples settle after the storm. Peace had returned, but this time it had been earned. Eventually I took some of the money and built a wooden dock, just like my grandfather used to talk about. I named it Justice Pier, a quiet place, free of fences, where I take my nephew Jamie to fish in the evenings. Sometimes we just sit and watch the water, not saying much, just listening to the wind. A couple of neighbors come by now and then, not to intrude, but to thank me. Daniel, the Marine, brought his daughter last week. You didn't just win for yourself, he told me. You reminded us all we don't have to live under fear. I nodded, handed him a rod. Want to fish? He smiled. You sure? I motioned to the water. It's mine, but the peace, that's meant to be shared.